take a walk around the outside perimeter of one of the most iconic motion picture studios and learn a little bit of its history as we take a look and see where Lana Turner made her very first film just 9 months after the 15-year-old was discovered at the Tops Cafe back in 1936. Well, I have climbed a mountain. That is how fueled up and absolutely appreciative I am of everyone's support, from the comments to the sharing, the coffees that some of you have bought from the link that I shared. I'm just beyond grateful and touched. Seriously, I'm over the moon, or I guess in this case, over a mountain. We are on the other side of Hollywood, basically the back side of the big mountain that you always see the Hollywood sign on. We're on the San Fernando Valley side, specifically overlooking Warner Brothers Studios in beautiful downtown Burbank, one of the most recognizable studios in American history, a studio so big it evolved into a brand. How about it, a brand known around the entire world, the entire planet, and it all stemmed from these sound stages, which from here, they look like little bread boxes, but each one of them has the power to, well, create something strong enough to transcend you to a different place. Those goosebumps you get when Marlon Brando yells for Stella in A Streetcar Named Desire, they come from here. And the kids from the Goonies finding One-Eyed Willie's treasure on his pirate ship, that happened on stage 16, one of the world's tallest sound stages with a huge water tank. It was also used for Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk. Postcards from the Edge, Rebel Without a Cause. Actually, all three of James Dean's movies were filmed here. That plus East of Eden and Giant. The Lost Boys, Funny Girl, Cool Hand Luke, Barbara and Paul. They both did so much here. Then you have the countless television shows like ER and Friends. Just so much great art and entertainment has come from this studio. A dream factory, as they're sometimes called. And this property, it looks kind of similar to how it did when the brothers acquired it back in the 20s. They've upgraded and modernized, of course, but even the backlot city streets are in the same part of the lot that they were in over 100 years ago. You've seen these streets and houses and so many, too many things to mention. We'll actually see it up close from the other side in a little bit. But much of the property's layout, it's still the same when it was First National Pictures, a production company that built their dream factory on these 62 acres back in 1926. 2 years later, First National Pictures would see their name evaporate as a quartet of brothers acquired their 62 acres. Harry, Albert, Sam, and Jack, all but Jack, were born in Poland. They emigrated here with their parents, first to Canada, then eventually to Youngstown, Ohio. The three older brothers, Harry, Abe, and Sam, they started showing movie reels at carnivals and fairs before opening up small theaters in the Ohio and Pennsylvania area. Their younger brother, Jack, he eventually got in on the fun, and before they knew it, they all decided to move west in the early 20s to begin their own production company from a building over on Sunset Boulevard. And they were officially incorporated on April 4th, 1923. Now, I know this isn't a Warner Brothers tour, but I want you to have a decent understanding of, well, just how fresh and relatively new the industry was, what this place was when Judy Turner showed up here. A place that just wouldn't exist had it not been for two movie stars, because business was looking very bleak for the Warner Brothers until the first movie star came along to save the day. His name was Rin Tin Tin. I'm not even kidding. I think he starred in 30 movies from the early 20s to the early 30s. He even has a star on the Walk of Fame. He saved this studio, and then in 1927, Al Jolson came along in the controversial film The Jazz Singer, which was just a gigantic hit, so big that Warner Brothers had no choice but to expand, which meant leaving their Sunset Boulevard headquarters, and they purchased these 62 acres. Warner Brothers isn't and wasn't the only movie studio in the area. Just over the Cahuenga Pass here sits Universal Studios up there. Carl Laemmle opened the facility in 1915. The theme park is there too. That opened in 1964 though. And here we are over 100 years later, and both of these rival studios, they're still really big players in this ever-changing game of an industry. Judy Turner showed up here at Warner Brothers in 1937, the same year that the studio won their very first Best Picture Oscar for the film The Life of Emile Zola. The Oscars, they too were only a decade old, and ironically, for me anyway, I don't think that Warner Brothers really hit their stride until around this time. I think that while their films of the early and mid 1930s are really good, they're just not quite remembered as classics, apart from really hardcore film fans. Maybe The Public Enemy. I mean, there's a few, but I think that the studio's films around the late 1930s is really when they start to get going. That's when Betty Davis did Jezebel and Dark Victory. And, well, it's after Judy blessed them with her presence. I mean, truthfully, though, the world hadn't even seen films like Casablanca, Gone with the Wind, or even The Wizard of Oz yet. If you ask me what my favorite studio backlot is, I will say that it's whichever one is in front of me. I love them all. There's just nothing like the energy of a backlot of a soundstage. I know it's an overused word, but I find them all to be just magical. I've worked here at Warner Brothers. I've seen tapings here, movies, visited friends on their shows. Every time I'm here, I'm in just awe. They have a handful of gates from which you can enter, but for some reason, I'm partial to this one, Gate 2. This entrance has been seen in so many films and television shows over the years. Just the other night, I noticed it in the third season of probably my all-time favorite show, The Comeback. Lisa Kudrow takes the same crosswalk that we just did. It's been seen and used so many times that there's now this excitement when you're somebody who wants to be in show business and you get to come here for the first time, whether it's for a job or for an audition, and you think, wow, right here is where Mel Brooks filmed Blazing Saddles. Not just a quick scene either, a huge, elaborate one where Harvey Korman runs with about 100 different actors with pie on his face. You might love that Pee Wee Herman filmed out here a decade later in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. They filmed a lot of that movie on the backlot here. Usually there's something that someone can get excited about, but that just wasn't the case for Judy. She wasn't star hungry. She wasn't even an actress. This was just an address on a piece of paper given to her by the Zeppo Marx agency for yet another audition.
Jack L. Warner, who, with his brothers, made the cinema the world's greatest medium of entertainment. Despite belief that sound films could not succeed, the Warner brothers made the first talkies with Al Jolson. Now, 30 years later, they're still right at the top. Jack Warner believes that a black and white film will soon be an exception. Next year, he promises his company will be filming the Royal Coronation in color for Pathé.
Warner Brothers is one of those studios that I think has done a really great job of preserving itself. A lot of these old administration buildings and offices are still here from the golden age of Hollywood. It's not all sound stages and production. You've got all sorts of behind the scenes jobs that need taking care of, like insurance, payroll, marketing. The list is endless. And I'm sure they've all rotated locations many, many times over the years, but I wanted to show you something because I don't think that many people notice this when they're driving by or walking by, really, but one of Warner Brothers' biggest stars is keeping watch, Mr. Bugs Bunny. So, back in 1937, 36-year-old director Mervyn LeRoy was 10 years into a career as a director. He had made some pretty big films like Little Caesar and I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang. The film that he was now working on was called They Won't Forget, and it was based on a book called Death in the Deep South, a fictionalized story based on the trial of real-life factory manager Leo Frank, who was wrongly convicted of raping and murdering a 13-year-old girl named Mary Fagan. The trial was sensational, and it ended with Leo getting sentenced to death, a sentence that was eventually reduced to life in prison, except that an angry mob actually kidnapped him from prison and lynched him to death at the age of 31 in 1915. It was later proven that he wasn't responsible for the crime, but by then it was too late. Leo Frank, he was also Jewish, so there were accusations of anti-Semitism playing a part in the trial. Racism was also taking place. The real story is very complex, but the fictional book took some liberties in telling the story, and naturally, Hollywood did as well. In this version, the victim's name was Mary Clay, and she was 16 years old. The part, it called for less than 20 lines, but it was one of the most important roles in the film, and Mervyn reportedly saw over 60 girls for the part, and none of them clicked, until, of course, Judy Turner walked in. Mervyn LeRoy died in 1987, and the first thing mentioned in most of his obituaries is that he produced The Wizard of Oz over at MGM. They also mentioned his Cecil B. DeMille Golden Globe, his Irving Thalberg Oscar, and even his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And of course, they mention that he was the man who gave Lana Turner, well, more than just her career. And he later recalled meeting her for the very first time at her audition. I wrote down what he said so that I could get it exactly right. He said, "She was so nervous, her hands were shaking. She wasn't wearing any makeup, and she was so shy, she could hardly look me in the face. Yet, there was something so endearing about her that I knew she was the right girl. She had tremendous appeal, which I knew the audience would feel." And, well, he meant it too, because the character of Mary was supposed to show up on screen and let the audience get to know her for just a little bit before she walks off screen where her untimely demise occurs, off camera. She'd have to make a big enough impression on filmgoers because her character, it would be referenced throughout the trial and the rest of the film, despite never being seen again. Well, after a very successful screen test, Mervyn LeRoy hired Judy Turner on February 12th, 1937, just 4 days after she turned 16. But more exciting to Judy than landing this role was that it paid $50 a week. She couldn't believe it. It was twice what her mother made at the beauty parlor, and that was the part that Judy couldn't wait to run home and tell her. As cameras started rolling on March 6th of 1937 for They Won't Forget, Mervyn LeRoy called Judy Turner and her agency to come into the studio for a meeting over an issue he had, her name. He thought Judy Turner was too plain, too average. It didn't encapsulate who or what she was. Honestly, she didn't really fight him. Also, he wasn't wrong. She's not a Judy Turner. She actually suggested dropping Turner and going by Judy Jean. That's worse, he said. Everyone who was sitting in his office, they casually just all started going through names, going down the alphabet, giving suggestions out loud, back and forth, when Judy suddenly leaned forward and blurted out, "Lana. What about Lana?" Lana Turner, LeRoy said. "I like it. Yes, Lana Turner." She didn't know where she got it. She had never even thought about it before. She later said it was like someone was speaking through her. Lana. Everyone in the room, agents, people from Warner Brothers, even her own mom, instantly agreed that from here on out, she'd only be known as Lana Turner. Perhaps adding to the whole Lana Turner discovery legend is the fact that They Won't Forget features a scene in which Mary Clay is sipping a milkshake at a soda counter. Art reflecting life. There are a few scenes with Mary being portrayed as your all-American high school student, and you see Lana in this, and I don't know, I just don't see a 16-year-old. I don't know if it's because it was the 1930s and it's on old film in black and white. She just seems more mature than that. I'd believe it if you told me I was looking at someone 25 years old. The old-fashioned, rather conservative wardrobe doesn't really help. I don't know if audiences felt the same way back in 1937, like if she was instantly identifiable as a high school student, or if people also thought she looked older. I don't know, is it irony that most of the time, even in silent films, all throughout today, they usually cast older actors to play younger, sometimes ridiculously, but here you have an actual 16-year-old playing a 16-year-old, and I don't know, she looks older. Perhaps that was on purpose, though, because Mervyn LeRoy was about to turn Lana Turner into someone who she didn't even know she was capable of becoming, because it never even crossed her mind while she was shooting back here on the back lot. She had never been on a set before. All of it was new to her, so whatever Mervyn LeRoy wanted, he got. And in this case, he turned a simple, short walk into a monstrous career move. While I love a giant soundstage, I think this is my favorite part of the lot, of any lot, the fake facade of city streets. You've seen them on Friends, you've seen them in Carol Burnett's Annie. They've changed over the years, but the idea hasn't. Fronts of fake buildings with absolutely nothing behind them. It's a trick that's been used since the beginning of film, and it's still happening. A crew can make one tiny portion look like a building from another city, state, country, even planet. Need a scene in New York? You don't have to pack. We'll film it right here. And in the case of They Won't Forget, they turned the backlot into southern Georgia. And it was here where Mervyn LeRoy asked Lana Turner to simply walk around the streets while he filmed her for what he called establishing shots. So she was put in a tight-fitting sweater with a skirt to show off her figure, and off she walked. They didn't have dailies back then where you could see the progress of a film being shot. It wasn't until it was finished and Lana was sitting in a dark theater in October of 1937 that she fully realized what was happening. There she was, 16 years old, watching her breasts bouncing on the silver screen while she walked to the music that was purposely scored to coincide with the bouncing of those breasts. She said it was like an out-of-body experience watching herself on screen. She wasn't even sure it was her. She'd never seen her body move, let alone had never seen herself walk before. She was sitting next to her mother, absolutely mortified. Neither of them really recognized who they were seeing on screen, but then again, I mean, neither of them had ever met Lana Turner before, nor did they expect her to ever get the amount of attention that she was about to receive. Mervyn LeRoy really wanted audiences to remember Mary Clay, and they sure did. The crimes committed against this character were done off camera, and he wanted the attention on her body because, well, in 1937, they couldn't film, nor could they even say the word rape. So he wanted to drive home the message that this poor girl was the victim of a sex crime. And as a film, it works. It received a lot of critical praise, and so did Lana. The first review that she read was from our friend Billy Wilkerson over at The Hollywood Reporter. A critic wrote that the role of the murdered schoolgirl, played by Lana Turner, is worthy of more than a passing note. This young lady has vivid beauty, personality, and charm. Well, with that, a star was born. And so was a nickname. She started receiving fan mail here addressed to the Sweater Girl. Lots and lots of fan mail. The Warner Brothers publicity department jumped on this, and she became known as the Sweater Girl, a moniker that Lana absolutely hated and one that took her quite some time to recover from. Lana eventually shed the nickname, but for years people would ask her about it, and she even refused to wear sweaters for some time after that movie came out. She also maintained that she was not wearing a padded bra either. Everything that you saw on screen was just her natural body. Really is kind of crazy that no one seemed to care about her age back then, but before you get mad at Mervyn LeRoy or the studio, you have to remember that American audiences, the movie-going public, that's who turned her into a sex symbol. And as much as she hated the whole notion of it, she later praised the film for the other issues that it tackles, like how media and politicians work hand in hand to create guilt and hate in order to sell newspapers. 1937, they won't forget. If you ever get the chance, come take the Warner Brothers studio tour. It's really great. They also have a great fun gift shop that's open to the public. You don't have to be on the tour to go inside. Plus, you get to see the brilliant genius Lisa Kudrow on the side of it. She filmed Friends and The Comeback here. I'm not kidding when I tell you I think The Comeback is my favorite. She's a true Warner Brothers queen. Lana Turner, on the other hand, she only shot a few things here. At the very, very beginning of her career and at the very, very end of her career with Falcon Crest, which filmed most of all of their interior set scenes here and various sound stages over its run. Perhaps we'll be back for that later, but for now, Lana herself thought the whole Sweater Girl ordeal was overhyped. She also thought that her role would be a one-and-done kind of job when the picture wrapped. Something fun that she could maybe tell people that she did later in life. Being an actress, it never crossed her mind. Being in movies never crossed her mind. She and her mother Mildred, they moved to LA for a better climate, for health reasons. So it was a huge surprise when Mervyn LeRoy cast her in the next film that he was producing for Warner Brothers called The Great Garrick. He cast her a few months after working with her, and she filmed her part before the release of They Won't Forget. Now, even though she wasn't a fan of how LeRoy portrayed her in her very first role, she did say throughout her life that he was a pure gentleman, always a gentleman, and they even went on to work together a few more times. The Great Garrick, however, was to be produced by LeRoy, but directed by James Whale, who I am mildly obsessed with. Did you ever see Gods and Monsters? Ian McKellen, he actually was Oscar nominated for playing James Whale in that. A haunting, fantastic film. Lynn Redgrave, she also got an Oscar nomination for playing his maid. Brendan Fraser's in it. It's just fantastic. James Whale, he was found dead in the swimming pool of his Pacific Palisades home in 1957. And his death, it was a mystery until the late 1980s when Whale's male lover revealed that there was a suicide note that the director had left behind all those years earlier. But in 1937, when Lana worked with him, James Whale was known for Frankenstein, starring Boris Karloff, and The Bride of Frankenstein with Elsa Lanchester, as well as The Invisible Man, starring Claude Rains, and Titanic's Gloria Stewart. Today, of course, these are all considered absolute masterpieces, and they've all helped keep the essence of Universal Studios alive to this day. The Great Garrick, on the other hand, the only film that James Whale made at Warner Brothers, isn't quite as revered. It starred Olivia de Havilland and Brian Aherne, who would coincidentally go on to marry Olivia's sister, Joan Fontaine, a few years later. Joan and Olivia, the only two sisters to ever win Best Actress Oscars. Two sisters who remained in a nasty feud until their dying days. Olivia's death not that long ago. But Lana Turner, she only had a very small role in this film, and it didn't do anything for anyone's career, but it did give her a chance to work with the brilliant James Whale. And Lana, she had a very interesting contract. She was actually never signed to Warner Brothers. She was signed to Mervyn LeRoy, a rare contract where he pretty much had say in what she did for a year or so, sort of like a manager. Louis B. Mayer, over at MGM, he called LeRoy up and said, "That loony, liney, leany Turner, I want her for a small part in one of our pictures. Will you loan her out?" Well, Mervyn did loan her out, and it was for a movie called The Adventures of Marco Polo. Turned out to be a big flop, starring Gary Cooper, who was extremely miscast. It also marked the debut of Sigrid Guri. You may remember her when I showed you her house in the Hollywood Heights tour. Well, Lana never even met Gary Cooper during any of this. She played a handmaiden, and her scenes were with actor Alan Hale. Lana did not enjoy making this forgettable film. First of all, they glued this horrible black wig on her every day, and not only that, but the studio shaved her eyebrows off in order to paint slanted black ones on her. This was that embarrassing era in Hollywood where they would cast white actors to play Asian. Yeah, Lana was playing an Asian handmaid. The worst part for her, however, was that her eyebrows never grew back, and for the rest of her life, she had to draw them on. Well, at least she could now afford plenty of makeup with her whole $50 a week that she was making, and with this new salary came time for some changes. One of those paychecks, it actually covered the cost of a small used car. Imagine that. Wasn't fancy, but it did get her to and from the studios and home. But home too needed a change. Mildred and Lana, they had worn out their stay at Gladys Taylor's, and now it was time to get their own place. Before Laurel Canyon was made famous by Carole King, Joni Mitchell, and the Doors, it was simply a quiet canyon neighborhood that just sat up the hill from Sunset Boulevard, where, ironically, Schwab's drugstore once sat. And this is actually one of the rare parts on the tour that I'm not 100% certain about. In Lana's book, she only mentions the street name, no address, but I'm going off of a real estate blog that claims Lana lived here. They also claim that Mama Cass and James Dean both lived or stayed here for a short period, so take it with a grain of salt. But it sounds right because Lana says in her book that the house sat up in the canyon and required 17 steps from the driveway to the front door. I didn't get close enough to count, but it sure looks like it could be. It's also really tight, so let's just back up a bit. It's also hard to see the house nestled up in the trees there, but a big reason they needed their own place was because Lana's grandfather, Mildred's father, came out here at the end of his life to be with his daughter, and it was in the Laurel Canyon house that he passed away. But the biggest reason was that Lana, now 17, was starting to date, and not so much boys from Hollywood High School either. Well, there were actually two kinds of dates. First, there were dates that the studios and publicity departments would arrange. And from about 16 to 18 years old, while Lana was living in Laurel Canyon, she went on a handful of those. Very common back then. Actors and actresses getting paired up to go to specific events to drum up publicity, benefiting both parties. Sometimes, though, people could be seen together and then the press would spin it into a huge lie. She was sent to the premiere of Warner Brothers' The Life of Emile Zola with a Western movie actor named Don Barry, and the next thing you know, the press was saying that they eloped to Mexico for a quick marriage. Never happened, nor did a rumored fling between her and a new actor, one who apparently was an extra in a crowd scene from They Won't Forget, an actor who Warner Brothers saw a lot of promise in, an actor by the name of Ronald Reagan. They were paired up and sent out to a nearby ranch for a publicity photo shoot, but outside of some horseback riding and a few dinners, the two never hooked up. Then there was the real dating, which a lot of the times was actually chaperoned by her mother, Mildred. I mean, Lana wasn't even old enough, really, to get into a lot of the places she frequented, so Mildred would join. But Lana was also a teenager, so she had her own freedom at times, but nobody caught this young redhead's attention, quite like the man who lived around the corner. If you've ever heard the name Greg Bautzer, then oh boy, do you know what a playboy he was. He was once described as being the only leading man in Hollywood who never made a single film. That is because he wasn't an actor, he was a lawyer. You would never know that, though, because he always had one of Hollywood's most beautiful actresses on his arm or by his side. I think he dated every single actress. And I don't blame them. He was charismatic, charming, and extremely good looking. He also represented just about every single actress in town, and this will give you an idea of just how charming he was. Even after he and all of his lady lovers broke up, they would keep him as their lawyer. And his career was just getting going when, at almost 27 years old, he met soon-to-be 18-year-old Lana Turner. Greg was getting over a failed marriage when he met Lana, and he was living here in Laurel Canyon with his mother, right in this lovely two-bedroom, 1,400 square foot house built in 1932. This house, the style, the architecture, and especially the small garages, it serves as a vivid reminder that there was an entire Laurel Canyon that existed before the 60s love era was ushered in. And we have a little guest. Hello, squirrel. I've been working on a Laurel Canyon tour. It's just rich with stories that haven't been heard because they get overshadowed by the music scene that was born here. I'm hoping to film it this summer. We're actually just about a 2-minute drive from where we just were. Very convenient for these two lovers. Now, Lana, she had been on several dates with handfuls of men, but nothing ever went further than make-out sessions and the occasional handsy man here and there. But Greg was different than the men she was used to. He didn't make unwanted passes at her. Instead, he demonstrated a rare amount of patience, and he actually courted Lana for some time before they actually made love. And when that day came, instead of taking her to, a hotel, he brought her right here to his home where Lana gave him her virginity. This squirrel, wow, just glued to this story. She wrote about the experience in her book, saying that it was rather unpleasant and painful, adding that it would take a few more times for her to experience an orgasm. She was very candid in her book. And what appealed to her most was the intimacy that she experienced with Greg, the moments before and after sex, the moments, where she could just lay in his arms and wallow in the afterglow. Okay, you need to go away. I cannot talk about 1930s sex while a squirrel stares at me. But at one point, Greg, he even gave her a ring that was Well, it was somewhere between a promise ring and an engagement ring, but Greg couldn't fully commit because, well, again, he was a playboy. And Lana knew this too. But like most young people, she just assumed that she would be different. She could be the one to get him to settle down. Uh huh. Well, her biggest obstacle in this whole challenge turned out to be one of her newest colleagues, an actress with whom Lana would soon be sharing a new studio backlot with. An actress who called her up and said, "Darling, this is Joan Crawford. I need you to come to my house in Brentwood. It's about Greg Bautzer, and I need you to come now."